Welcome back, and welcome to our final episode of What the Hell is Going On in Gaza. Congratulations on making it through 30 episodes. We covered a lot of important ground. We started with answering some fundamental questions about Israel in Part 1, then Hamas in Part 2. In Part 3, we looked at the history that got us to this point. In Part 4, we focus on past attempts to find peace and what went wrong. In Part 5, we examined why the world sees Israel the way it does. Part 6 covered some significant moral issues exposed by this conflict. From there, in Part 7, we examined what had made a bad situation much, much worse. In Part 8, we questioned whether peace is even possible and what that would take. And now here we are in Part 9, where we'll offer some final thoughts on our subject and look forward to the uncertainty of the future. Let's get started. We all hear the problems in the Middle East are intractable, that they cannot be solved. Maybe that's why simple answers like, Israel is evil and never should have been created, can seem so appealing to some people. Don't fall for it. The world is complex, and today's problems have deep historical roots. The dynamics between Israel and Gaza, Hamas's attack on October 7th, Israel's response, and the reactions from other countries are all influenced by events and decisions and actions that occurred particularly over the last 100 years, but also over prior decades and centuries. That story, the larger context, is critical to understand if we are to judge what's going on today and what might happen in the future. It's critical to know the facts. That's what our series has been all about, and hopefully we've succeeded in giving you the information you need to better understand these things. We've tried our best to be objective, honest, and rational, and avoid the meaningless slogans and baseless accusations. We've tried to focus on the important events and major themes that help you make sense of the situation. What else is there to say? Well, let's talk a little bit about where things could go from here and how that's connected to what we've learned so far. When we talk about conflict in the Middle East, when we talk about attacks on Israel, when we talk about the risks of a larger regional war, the elephant in the room is Iran. Iran's role in the current conflict is significant. We've touched on that a little in previous episodes, but let's take a closer look, starting with some history and context. For most of the 20th century, Iran was a monarchy with close ties to the West. In 1979, the Iranian Revolution overthrew the Shah and consolidated power in an authoritarian religious state led by a supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini. Today's Islamic Republic of Iran is a major regional power with massive fossil fuel reserves, a strategically significant location, advanced military capabilities, and an undisputed position as a leader of the Shia Islamic world, still very much a brutal authoritarian religious state led by a supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini. Today's Islamic Republic of Iran is committed to dominating the region under the banner of Shia Islam. Writer and journalist Haviv Redig Gur framed it well on Barry Weiss's podcast, Honestly. He said, quote, Iran, under the cover of America's obsession with stability, is demolishing nations and trying to destroy us. Literally everybody's lives in the Middle East depend on ending the Iranian regime's imperialist, redemptionist crusade that has so far conquered and destroyed, basically demolished or is in some state of demolishing 4 different Arab countries and wants to destroy my country and says so publicly and will not stop until somebody stops it. Ironically, before the Ayatollahs seized power, Iran and Israel maintained close relations. In fact, even today, the Iranian diaspora, those who fled the oppressive authoritarian Islamist regime, are strong and vocal supporters of Israel. Why? Because they value democracy and they've seen the terrible consequences of Islamist rule. Natan Sachs, in his 2019 article published by the Brookings Institute, wrote that, quote, Israel was relegated by Ayatollah Khomeini to the status of Little Satan, the great Satan being the United States. For the new Iranian regime, Israel became a central focus of ideological, religion-infused vitriol. There's even a street in Tehran named for the assassin of Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, who was the first in the region to sign a peace agreement with Israel. The combination of this hatred of Israel and drive for regional hegemony under the banner of Islam has led Iran to take great steps to delegitimize, destabilize, and destroy Israel. Most significantly, Iran has sponsored, supported, funded, and trained Shia Islamist militias, proxy armies, and terrorist groups. This includes Hezbollah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and various Shia militias in Iraq, as well as the Houthis in Yemen. Iran also provides significant support to Hamas, despite it being a Sunni Islamist group. An October 2023 Wall Street Journal article titled, "Hamas Fighters Trained in Iran Before October 7th Attacks" reported this, quote, "The Wall Street Journal, citing senior Hamas and Hezbollah officials, has reported that the Quds Force helped plan the attack and agreed that it could go ahead at a meeting in Beirut on October 2nd with leaders of Hamas and Hezbollah. An advisor to the Syrian government and a European official gave the same account of Iran's involvement." And, quote, "Hamas officials have boasted of Iran's support since the attacks. Quote, Hezbollah and Iran supported us with weapons, expertise, and technology," Khalid Mashal, a senior Hamas official in Doha, said in an interview with Al Arabiya. These groups have attacked Israel nearly continuously for decades. Of them, Hezbollah, which is based in Lebanon and is extremely closely tied to Iran, represents the greatest threat to Israel. It is estimated that Hezbollah has between 150 and 200,000 missiles, and according to Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, more than 100,000 trained fighters. Haviv Gur also said, quote, "If you follow Lebanese social media over the last 10 months, your heart will break because they are terrified of the war they know and believe and say Hezbollah is bringing upon them on the order of a foreign regime, meaning Iran." Where does all this leave Israel? More than 75,000 Israelis are displaced from their homes in northern Israel because Hezbollah has relentlessly bombarded the region since October 7th. Hezbollah continues its threats to completely eradicate Israel. Hezbollah continues attacking Israel and killing Israeli soldiers and civilians. Iran continues to explicitly state its support for Hezbollah and its intention to see Israel eradicated. Most experts on the region believe a full-scale war between Israel and Hezbollah is nearly certain, and this may involve full-scale, direct participation by Iran. Here's a key concept to keep in mind as we talk about what Iran might do and what it might direct its proxies like Hezbollah to do. Iran is not crazy, and Iran is not stupid. They have and will continue to act in a manner consistent with their core beliefs, which include that Islam should dominate the world, that their fundamental purpose is to spread the revolution, first throughout their region and then throughout the world, that Israel represents the most immediate and important challenge to their ability to do so, and that their divinely ordained purpose is so important that the loss of millions of lives in its pursuit is utterly inconsequential. In fact, like Hamas, Iran sees the loss of civilian life as helpful to their cause of destroying Israel. There's a quip that's commonly expressed throughout the Middle East. Iran is willing to fight Israel to the last Arab. The cynicism and sarcasm of this statement is that Iran is Persian, not Arab. Today, Iran is very committed to its objectives. The United States has sought to deter Iran, but unfortunately has increasingly lost credibility as a deterrent force. The United States has proven that economic incentives will not dissuade or distract Iran from its objectives. The United States has repeatedly chosen appeasement over deterrence to the point that Iran does not believe there are any consequences for its actions or those of its proxies. The United States has announced publicly and often that its priority is to avoid escalation. This is the opposite of deterrence. It is telling your enemies that they can act with impunity, and the worst that might happen is a proportional response. Former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton made this point in January when commenting on a drone strike by Iranian-backed militants that killed 3 American servicemen in January 2024. Quote, To be clear, I don't think it should be proportionate. I think it should be disproportionate. That's how you create deterrence in the mind of your adversary, that the cost to them of attacking our forces is so high they won't do it again. It's just common sense. If there are no consequences, or the consequences are minimal and acceptable, they simply won't deter the enemy. Then National Security spokesperson John Kirby voiced the Biden administration's perspective on MSNBC's Morning Joe. Referring to Iran, he said, quote, "We know that they are resourcing, they are supplying, in some cases they're providing information that allows these groups to do this. We're taking that very seriously. We don't want a wider war with Iran." This isn't deterrence. This is telling your enemy that you care more about avoiding conflict than stopping them. Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., said, quote, "The belief that America, Israel, and other friendly states could grapple with Iran's terrorist tentacles while leaving the Leviathan unscathed was misguided. Admit finally that as long as Iran remains unvanquished, the next war and the next are inevitable, culminating in a nuclear showdown." Again, where does all this leave Israel? Iran is undeterred by the United States. Iran wants to destroy Israel. And now Iran is on the verge of having nuclear weapons. While Hamas's capabilities are greatly degraded and may soon be neutralized, the effort has exacted a significant toll on Israel. Its military personnel and reservists have fought hard and long already. Israel's human resources are not exhausted, but they are diminished. At the same time, Iran's other Islamist proxy armies are numerous and strong. Hezbollah's capabilities are many times those of Hamas. In a full-scale war, the toll on Israel would be enormous and the threat to its existence very real. If Iran enters the war directly, the threat would be even greater. Israel has significant military resources as well, including nuclear weapons. What happens if two nuclear powers go to war? One that is more than willing to accept mass civilian losses in pursuit of God's will, and the second facing possible annihilation by the first. It's a situation that could easily lead to a devastating nuclear war. In a conventional war, Israel would rely heavily on its ability to purchase or receive arms from the United States. But public opinion in the United States, certainly among the progressive left, is waning. The point is that the stakes are incredibly high and the situation extremely precarious. Like everything else, it's complicated. There are a variety of factors that could either inflame or temper the situation. On the one hand, those variables include Iranian fear of U.S. intervention despite the broader trend we've discussed. Fear of intervention by Western allied Sunni Islam nations like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Oman, and perhaps fear of a nuclear response by Israel. On the other hand, countervailing variables include growing anti-Israeli sentiment around the world, waning U.S. political support for Israel, a determination perhaps that this is the time to strike because of the longer-term implications of a solidifying Sunni Western coalition with Israel, and increasing religious zeal and willingness of local populations to martyr themselves. No one knows what will happen. The conflict between Israel and Hamas in Gaza seems nearly certain to end with the elimination of Hamas as a military or political force in Gaza. However, the larger situation in which that conflict exists is far less certain. Things could change quickly and could go in almost any direction. The fight between Israel and Hezbollah, which has been going on with some intensity since October 7th, could escalate dramatically. Further direct engagement by Iran, as well as escalation by other Iran-backed proxy terror groups, are very real possibilities too. Time will tell, but understanding the real facts of the situation and understanding the root issues, the history, and the dynamics will continue to be critically important. That's because what we do is important, how we treat each other, what we as a democracy demand from our leaders, and what messages we convey to the rest of the world, including the people who are part of this conflict. So we need to be smart and make smart choices. That's it. Thank you for devoting the time to learn more about this subject. We hope you're better able to understand the war in Gaza and the larger situation and will be better equipped to understand what comes next. Given the complex history of the region, one thing we can say for sure is that the relationship between Israelis and Palestinians will not be finally resolved once the war in Gaza ends, nor will the relationship between Israel and its neighbors. There will be more to this story, and maybe if we are all well informed, we can play a small role in helping to ensure a good long-term outcome rather than a disaster for both sides. We can all continue to hope for and work towards a brighter future. This concludes our series, What the Hell is Going On in Gaza? Thank you for watching.